I am not a historian, but neither are you. So, how about we, the people, learn this stuff together? Welcome to US 101.
The Draft Lottery, a live report on tonight's picking of the birth dates for the draft.
I want you to imagine something, if you can. Imagine that it's December 1st, 1969. You just turned 19, and you're sitting at home with the family in front of the television after dinner. But you didn't really have much of an appetite. No one did that night. Or maybe you're 21 years old, and over at a friend's place with a group of buddies from college. There's a beer in your hand and you're all gathered around the tube, but you'll want to stay sober for what you're about to see. Or maybe you're 24 and driving around that night with that special someone. You've got the radio on, but it isn't to listen to your favorite song, the one you dance to, the one you hold each other close to. And tonight, you're holding each other's hands as if it might be the last time. In the United States, in the middle of that holiday season, as the war in Vietnam raged on as it had for years now, many were glued to their televisions and radios. Because this night, televised live, 366 little blue plastic capsules were dumped into a transparent container and selected at random. Inside these capsules were birthdays, including yours, April 12, August 9, March 23, and yes, even February 29. The leap year wasn't forgotten. And hundreds of thousands of American men who year after year happily celebrated their birthday, their special day, hoped it wouldn't be selected anytime soon. Because if it was, they were to report to their local draft office to begin the process of joining America's armed forces and would head overseas to fight in Vietnam. The conflict between North and South Vietnam had been escalating since the 1950s. Ho Chi Minh, who led in the North, wanted independence for Vietnam and looked to unify the country as a communist state. In the South, the United States backed anti-communist politician Diem, who wanted Vietnam to have a more Western type of economy and culture. This clash between North and South extended into the 1960s when President Kennedy was determined to stop the spread of communism, lest it extend throughout the countries of Southeast Asia, like dominoes falling one after another.
In the final analysis, it's their war. They're the ones who have to win it or lose it. We can help them, we can give them equipment, we can send our men out there as advisors, but they have to win it, the people of Vietnam, against the communists. We're prepared to continue to assist them.
Kennedy wouldn't be able to complete his war on communism thanks to an assassin's bullet in 1963. So his successor, Lyndon B. Johnson, would carry the torch and increase America's military presence in Vietnam in March of 1965, following an attack on 2 U.S. ships in the Gulf of Tonkin by the Viet Cong.
I have today ordered to Vietnam the Air Mobile Division and certain other forces which will raise our fighting strength from 75,000 to 125,000 men almost immediately. Additional forces will be needed later, and they will be sent as requested. This will make it necessary to increase our active fighting forces by raising the monthly draft call from 17,000 over a period of time to 35,000.
Back in the States, a rift was growing between American citizens. More and more people were calling for the withdrawal of troops from Vietnam. They would call it a war of aggression, that we were forcing our ideals and beliefs on a country that already had plenty of their own, and that we needed to make love, not war.
I got a Silver Star, Purple Heart, Army Commendation Medal, 8 Air Medals, National Defense, and the rest of this garbage. It doesn't mean a thing.
The other side would defend the conflict, claiming that Vietnam needed democracy and we were the only way they would get it. Anyone who said otherwise was a coward, a traitor to their country, not a real American. On November 15, 1969, over 250,000 people descended on Washington, D.C., calling for an end to the United States occupation of Vietnam. This was the peak of the anti-war movement that had seen the horrors of war, beamed into their homes each night in glorious Technicolor, heard about the massacre at My Lai, where over 400 Vietnamese villagers were murdered by American soldiers. But even so, less than 1 month later, we come back to you at 18, or 21, or 24, on that December night, awaiting your fate. You're sitting in front of a television or a radio, holding your breath as the first blue capsule is selected, and the birthday,
September 14th.
is now replaced by a new number.
September 14, 001.
Those men, born on that day between 1944 and 1950, will be the first ones that must make their way to a draft office. Maybe you breathe a sigh of relief because you dodged that bullet. Or maybe your head slowly droops to the ground because now you might have to dodge an actual bullet. And all throughout the night, this goes on as a nation watches. The next birthdays are read aloud. April 24, 002.
December 30th.
December 30,
003. February 14th.
February 14 is 004.
October 18th, September 6th, October 26th, September 7th, November 22nd, December 6th, August 31st, December 7th, July 8th, April 11th, July 12th, December 29th, January.
You should know that 2/3 of those that were fighting in Vietnam had volunteered to do so, but 1/3 would be drafted into the service. And as the number of soldiers increased, and as resentment towards the war grew, more men tried to find ways to avoid heading overseas. These draft dodgers, as they were called, would try all sorts of ways to be granted a deferment. Some were in college and needed to finish their education. Some may have had physical problems or mental issues that would have stopped them from being a perfect soldier. Some suggested to their draft boards that they were a homosexual. Others would flee the country to places like Canada or Mexico. And maybe on that December night, your birthday was called near the end of the lottery, and you wouldn't have to head to your draft office as there would already have been plenty of men that reported for duty. Or maybe your birthday was one of the first, and you had to perform that duty. What do you do? Would you take up arms and fight? Would you try to get a deferment? Would you defiantly burn your draft card and stand against Uncle Sam? Would you run? What do you imagine you would do? Can you imagine it?